Typically, I like to start with a statistic that 43% of first time homebuyers believe that they need 20% or more as a down payment in the United States to purchase a home. And obviously, that couldn't be further from the truth. However, that takes professionals like myself.
Our guest today is Mike Hajjar, a trusted mortgage loan officer and a leader at Landmark Mortgage Planners. Over the last 20 years, he's helped over 2,500 families achieve their home ownership dreams. Truly incredible. Through his podcast, The Financial Rebound, he shares his journey of overcoming 7 figures in debt, rebuilding his financial life, and helping others avoid common pitfalls. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you so much, Fisher. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited for what we got going today.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. Of course, before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about some of our backgrounds. We have a lot of similarities in how we think and how we want to help people, both in the financial category, really increase financial literacy. But that must stem from somewhere. And so, this idea of overcoming 7 figures in debt, I'm sure there's some people who have similar numbers there, and just people in general who are struggling with debt, especially given the crazy inflation that we've seen, the rise in food prices. It's been a wild financial environment for the last number of years, both in United States as well as in Canada, where I'm based. What I'm curious, Mike, is how did this problem develop for you, and when did you realize that you needed to really tackle it?
So I was in 2016 is kind of where I was struggling with being 7 figures in debt. I was probably had too much of an ego to file bankruptcy, so I wanted to kind of push through that. But I was sitting down with my coach, and we were talking about some mortgage concepts and whatnot. And he paused me in my tracks, and he said, "Mike, hold on." He was asking me a question. He could tell I didn't understand it, and he said, "All right, before we do anything, I want you to entrench yourself into, these financial literacy concepts." He said, "You're a numbers guy, but you're not the basics of financial literacy. You just." And then what I appreciate is that he didn't sugarcoat it. He's like, you need it." So, and then prior to that, what really stemmed to all of that 7 figures of debt was um, when I had landed in the hospital, diverticulitis. I ended up having a surgery, and it kept me in the hospital for 2 weeks. But I'm not like somebody who could sit and watch like movies, and I lose my mind already being in the hospital. So I picked up Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that was probably the first book that I read willingly. Now, I've got a plethora of a whole library of different things. But yeah, definitely sitting there and in the hospital by myself, eating ice chips while my team was being stolen from me. It's kind of focused on that book, and it allowed me to really see things from other people's point of view and simultaneously. So after I had read that book, where that ties to what my coach said was, I had really created my own urge for learning at that point, and I just became a student then of a lot of the books that you see behind me now.
Amazing. And you'd heard about that book obviously somewhere? Was it your coach that had recommended it to you? Is that where you got the inspiration to get the book?
No, I was so irritated at the hospital. I was like, let me just go online and see what good book recommendations would be. And I'm happy I landed on that one. Divine timing. And it was really a book that changed my life forever. It wasn't. I had heard of the book, but as you hear of like the Think and Grow Rich and some of these popular books. But that one was just standing out to me. I wish it was a cooler story on that, but it stood out to me for whatever reason, and I've probably read it, 5, 6 times since the first time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so being in the hospital 2 weeks, I mean, myself, I've spent at least a week in the hospital before. I know how much of a pain that can be. Not to make a joke about the pain you may have been in, but recovery there's a lot happening. You're a young man at that stage. There's a lot going on. You're trying to grow and run a business. What were some of the other things that started to happen at that same time? I mean, I would imagine, there was some things leading up to you getting into the hospital and then being there for 2 weeks. It's hard to run a business, especially in a mortgage practice, from a hospital bed. So, what were some of the things that started to happen around you during that time frame?
Well, there's a lot of health issues, right? The mortgage industry was changing at that time, and I was always in the mindset like, it doesn't matter whatever we do, I'll always be able to go back tomorrow and make it back times three, or which served me well in some aspects, but did not serve me well in the overall, because it started to take a toll on my health. The stress levels got out of control.
Mhm,
A lot of doubt and fear crept in, and a lot of those, you should give up, you should change industries, you should do this. A lot of, I think, not only my physical health but my mental health was affected, and I think more than anything, um, probably the biggest thing that I can attribute to that I hold on today is never quitting.
mm,
Because that was, I had every out to do it there, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And doesn't mean there's not challenges always, but we learn how to deal with those challenges better. And I just wouldn't be where I in the position that I am now had I not chose to push through and persevere.
hmm. And so, knowing that seeing the impact on your health, what were some of the things you started to shift and change when you were able to get back into the business? Obviously you increased your reading, I can tell, but how did you start to look at approaching your business life differently than you did prior to landing in the hospital?
I ran it like a business, not like I don't know what I was doing. Well, I was a phenomenal salesman. I had, some great people on my team. But I sat down and started to work on the business, committing to that more so than all the time that I was working in the business.
Mm,
So from that 30,000 foot view of what a business owner would look like, all the things that come, to start reducing those stress levels, time management, um, tracking activities, and really just making sure that I was in line. But I don't know that anything was more powerful than mindset for me, because that was what I had to hang on to. And I just started to see things through a different lens at that time. I didn't see things the same. And for the positive, right? Not in a negative way. I started to look at things as, okay, there's going to be challenges. Take accountability as a leader and do the things that you need to do to push through. I know it sounds cliche, but there's a lot of power found in those cliches. That's hence the reason they are cliches, right? Um, and I really started to change my circle at that point.
mm,
It was, I was in my 20s. I was heavy in the party scene. Just what some of us do in our 20s. Not the brightest when it came to my outside of work life, but I started to change that. I quit drinking. I think that was another huge thing for me, both on my physical and mental health. And at the time, it's kind of a fad now for people to stop drinking. But when I did, it was like, what do you mean you don't drink? So it was a different sort of aspect, but that was a godsend, because I don't think the mindset would have been there had I continued to drink and stay out till 4 a.m. You can't run a business that way.
hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And they say that you're the makeup of the top 5 people you spend the most time with, and so obviously, that was becoming more present to you. And what I'm hearing, Mike, is that being in the hospital gave you the time for self-reflection, and it allowed you
100%.
to reposition your thinking and make conscious choices about how you wanted your life to run moving forward.
Correct.
Amazing. Now, shooting forward, that was a number of years ago. I mean, we're it was about 8 to 9 years ago, roughly, that happened to you. You've had a really good run since then in a new environment. How have you restructured things from a business standpoint and with your team since that hospital experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. So back at that time, I was running more of a consumer direct transactional model, scaling national consumer direct teams, and I switched my business to a relationship model where again now with back to becoming a student, I was able to go and talk to professionals that I didn't have a value add for before. Of course, in the mortgage business, a lot of people work with real estate agents, so there's always a value add there. But where we really shine on the mortgage planning side, and why Landmark Mortgage Planners has been the number one branch at American Financial Network the last 4 years, not because we're so smart or cool or it has nothing to do with us, and it has everything to do with a mortgage planning business model, which in short is the concept of being there for the client before, during, and well after the closing. So sometimes a client is, making a short-term decision and saying, all right, off of emotion, like I want to put 50% down. I want to pay cash or whatever it may be, where we would look like to someone like yourself, or a financial advisor, whatever the professional we needed was, to come in and say, okay, what is the opportunity cost on this? What does that look like? On what does that look like 30 years out, and how detrimental can that be to their retirement? I don't care if they're 30 or 55, because somewhere along the way we were all told we'd be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. Now, that might be true for people retiring today, but guys like you and I and people that still have a run going, we have a TBD tax rate